मूलम् अधः शाखम् अश्वत्थं प्राहुरव्ययम् छन्दांसि यस्य पर्णानि यस्तं वेद स वेदवित्.
Pranam Didi, thank you so much for agreeing to come to this festival Pranitva. This is the second season of the festival. This was thought, and the concept was to create an awareness and maybe again revive and think about the connections of art and nature. We know that art is imbibed from nature, but in our long run we tend to move away from our roots. And so this is like again to through dancers, scholars, critics, it is an awareness, it is a venture to create awareness amongst people, to send this message that yes, and especially in this pandemic when we again realized that how much nature was important, and like in a matter of weeks in the lockdown we got back so much of greenery. So it is, and through this venture, it is just that awareness so that people again remembers, and we are aware of the importance of nature, and through art, how nature can be linked, art and nature can be linked. So this is our festival, what it is about. And we have been planting some trees in the first season also, and now also we have been planting some trees in the city of Kolkata. And so this is, and it is an online session, a season of festival of dance performances and some interviews. Thank you so much, Didi.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Before we start, a little bit about your achievements. Parvati Datta is an immensely talented and versatile thinker-dancer, and also an acharya and arts administrator. The director of Mahagami Gurukul, she has translated years of rigorous training under Pandit Birju Maharaj Ji, Pandit Kelucharan Mahapatra, and Guru Madhavi Mudgal Ji into simple, insightful, and fun concepts that are very easy to grasp for young kids. Her diverse international experience only not adds to the life and the vitality of her interaction with children. Thank you so much, Parvati. There is a lot of her achievements. There is a lot of her performances we know about. So this is just a small introduction about you. We are really, and your example, the example that you have set is a kind of a torch bearing, so that like it is like, I hope like many follow this path, and it is a very, very strong and a very I think it is a hard decision to take, but, and so that is why you need, it is a gratitude for us that you've been a part of it, and we are really, really thankful, and we are really honored to have you in our festival. Thank you so much, Didi. We'll start with the first question that we had for you. Didi, since you have been practicing both the forms, Odissi and Kathak, for years, how different would be the depiction of the different aspects of nature in the two different styles of the Indian classical dance form?
Well, I think all these dance forms that we practice today, we more popularly we address or we categorize these dance forms as classical dance forms. But we should be reminded that this is a colonial term which came with probably the Britishers and maybe other travelers. because in the West they already had a concept of looking at a particular kind of music or a particular kind of literature or dance as classical. And so I think this was the best way to describe or identify with the dance forms that we practice and perform. And when we look at the scriptures, we realize that, oh, this is so old. I mean, and though it is like ever new, it is young, it is ever new, it is old, but it is, you know, it is chira puratana chira nutana. That's how our dances are, isn't it? So, having said that, one thing is very important whenever we say that we are practitioner of an Indian traditional dance form. We have to always keep this in mind that we have a little bit of some other dance form also in our existing vocabulary, probably because most of the dance forms have come from or probably originated from a common consciousness or a common path. And so if you look at Natya Shastra or some of the ancient treatises, then we realize that, yes, this is something which is so close to Odissi and the present form of Odissi, or this is something which is so much Kathak. But no, this looks like Manipuri and so on. So that coming to the technique part of it. But then since we have also felt, and we do have evidences that all these dance forms emerged from common consciousness, from common streams of understanding and streams that kept merging and blending with each other. Also a reflection of different kinds of faiths, different kinds of, I would say, Vaicharik Parampara, way of thinking, way of reflecting. So while we look at these dance forms as a manifestation or a path towards manifestation of these different ways of thinking and reflecting, I think nature plays one of the most vital roles in the whole process of how this all these ideas became, transformed into the presentable form. Presentable form in the sense your technique, your abhinaya, your stance, your bodily movement, the way you understand music, the way you look at tal. I think nature is one of the foundations for all that. Right from the very idea that how did a Vadya come into being. So we have a beautiful legend in Natya Shastra that you had the rains happening, and one of the Ganas was so mesmerized with the sounds of the raindrops that were pouring on a pushkara full of lotus flowers and lotus leaves. And so there's a large lotus leaf which has a large circumference, and so the sound is different, and then there is a medium size, and then there's a smaller leaf, and so the swaras, and so the raindrops start creating interesting patterns. And that is where human mind must have first started thinking that how do I recreate this? And we find it in such a beautiful way in these legends, right from Natya Shastra to so many other texts. We have these legends, we have folklores, we have oral tradition, we have our own faith system, our belief system, in which we've always looked at nature as one of the most important sources of inspiration, one of the most important sources of looking at bodily expressions. Look at our hastas, any hasta that you do, how did all this happen? I think we were looking at nature, we looked at plants and animals and living beings and things around us, and the human body wanted to respond. There's this urge of human mind, human body, human consciousness to respond to whatever is happening around you. So the moment you see a tree swaying in the breeze, you start feeling that, oh, I need to move my body like this. Or if you see the river, the water of river you know, the waves. You want to do something like that with the body, and so the inspiration. It's so deep. I think human mind never wanted to talk about it because we knew that we were a subset of nature. I think this kind of discussion becomes more important in the 21st century when we've actually not been paying attention to the power of nature, and we always felt that nature is probably a recreational object for human beings. And that's how there's so many industries, tourism industries and travel industries that thrive around this concept of selling beautiful locations and beautiful experiences that revolve around nature. But I think what were artists doing? I think artists were all the time being inspired, mesmerized, influenced, impacted, and they always learned from nature. And there was this deep feeling of paying gratitude to nature in whatever way you can. And when I say paying gratitude, it could be also a way of communicating, narrating, connecting, and that's how saying thanks to nature. Look at the Parmelus in Kathak. How did the Parmelus come? Or we have a lot of banis in Odissi that come from various sounds. We have the movement of the oceanic movement or the movement of the waves, which is one of the most common features, one of the predominant features of Odissi dance. And we call it bhasa. So these are, bhasa means to float. So make your body move as though it is floating. Isn't that beautiful? You know, you have this gross body which is made of bone and flesh. Body is, after all, it is a gross structure. It is thos padartha. You have to make a taral padartha out of this gross body. Make it subtle, make it fluid, convert it into a luminous fluidity. So this is the ideal. This is the idealism which a dancer wants to look at through the bodily movement. So I have always felt that yes, Odissi, because the shores of Odisha, you have the huge ocean and the oceanic movements. I think centuries back, human being was so impacted. I would also say impacted. It's not just inspiration. It's impacted because there is a larger body. It's beyond your reach. It's beyond your comprehension, the power of nature and the natural forces. And so all that you can do is return your feelings, return your learnings in some way. And that's how probably dance was born. So in Odissi, one of the most predominant features that I look at is the beautiful oceanic movement, the waveform, which just creates a sublime consciousness inside you. The moment I start moving my body like this, I start feeling that all my rigidity, all my hard feelings, all my ego, I have to shed it off. Because otherwise, I cannot flow like a river. I cannot flow like an ocean. I have to, so that's what I learned from nature. And my dance teaches me that. And we are indebted to our gurus, our acharyas, our ancient seers, the tradition, most importantly, who brought this conscious. Similarly for Kathak, I always, when I look at the basic sthanaka, the nikas, or this position, I always think, I look at a tree. I think of a tree. Why you have a standing position in Kathak is because you envision a tree and you think that just the way a tree is stable, it stands stationary. It doesn't move too much, but when there is gentle breeze, then the branches will start swaying. So that's how your hand starts moving when you do the nikas or when you do any other movement. So you are gently responding to a breeze. And even if you're absolutely still, like in the Tat, you're not doing anything much. But it's just the breath your own conscience, your own response to your own breath, it's in a way indicative of the presence of Vayu, one of the Pancha Tattvas around you. And all that you do is just little fluttering of the wrist. So this is closer to the fluttering of the leaves. Even when there is absolute stillness, you will see that, oh, there is no breeze, there is nothing, but you see a minute movement of the leaf. And that restraint and that beautiful poetic rendition you see in the Tat, or in some of the most poised and restrained passages in Kathak. Whereas you have the parans and all, those are like responding to like more powerful breeze and, you know, like that. So I see that magnitude building up, the intensity building up. And I have always, if I want to look at the Pancha Tattvas and if I want to look at these dance forms and identify which particular dance form is closer to which Tattva, I would always feel that Vayu Tattva is probably the governing Tattva for Kathak, because you have a lot of breezy movements, and water, Jala for Odissi. Everything, anything that you do, you flow in that sublime consciousness. So see, there are so many layers of looking at nature. What nature teaches, how nature moves, how nature manifests itself, and how it sustains itself. I think that is the most important thing. How it heals itself, how it rejuvenates itself, and how it sustains. This is something which is so strong. And that's how our paramparas have been. There have been so many challenges, so many phases of trials and turbulences with our paramparas, and see, they are still there. So that's also something. It's the law of nature. Whatever is born will definitely merge back to nature. But then whatever is born is also destined to be sustained.
Yes. Beautifully, yes. Beautifully. And like, as you were saying, like Panchva Tattva, if you assign, I mean, if you think these two, Vayu to Kathak and Jal to Odissi, then what, like other three, could you like...
No, I don't mean to say that the other elements are not
not there, yes. It's all, but more predominant, yes.
Everything is there. You know, like
yes.
the dance form is like a language. So you do express everything.
Yes.
But the most important, like a predominant characteristic feature, if you want to see, yes, of course, that breezy feel of the body.
Yeah, it's true.
Treatment of the body like a tree. Yes. So your arms are like the branches, and your leaf, your wrist and your palm is like the leaves, and the lower part of the body is like the trunk of the tree, and so how you move. So this is so beautiful. It's so inspiring. In fact, I am suddenly reminded of the Ashtapadi, which was long back composed by Pandit Vindadin Maharaj, which I think almost every Kathak dancer knows and dances also. Niratata dhanga bahe pavana manda sugandha. So, see, it is actually about a scenic location. Niratata dhanga bahe pavana manda sugandha sheetana bansi vatatata nikata jamuna Vrindavan ki kunja galin mein naache gopi umang. Okay, so this is probably, if we go towards the literal meaning, it would just simply mean that, oh, Vrindavan ki kunja galin mein jahan sundar जल भी बह रहा है, नदी बह रही है और सुंदर शीतल पवन भी बह रही है, ऐसी जगह नृत्य हो रहा है और ऐसा नृत्य करना चाहिए. Okay, that could be probably the literal meaning, but what I understand from that, and this is how I teach and I explain, is that how you should dance. Niratata dhanga. How you should dance. Dance should be like Bahe pavana manda सुगंध, नाच में सुगंध भी होना चाहिए. ऐसा ना हो साइक्लोनिक डांस हो, you know. Sometimes we want to dance, but we actually end up creating a turbulent environment, and people are impacted because of the turbulent environment. People don't feel the fragrance. So this is the teaching. Bahe pavan मंद जेंटल पवन होना चाहिए. मंद सुगंध यानी वो कला, वो जो आपका रेंडिशन है ना, उसका एक फ्रेग्रेंस होना चाहिए. एंड इट शुड बी, यू नो, लाइक इट शुड परवेड इन द होल environment, in the whole surroundings where you are dancing. Bahe pavan manda sugandha sheetal. It should bring some calmness to your soul, to your consciousness, to your understanding, to your senses. तो ऐसा नाच होना चाहिए. और शायद ऐसा नाच वो लोग वहां करते थे because the natural surroundings were so inspiring and so beautiful, and they were all in a blissful state. So what I want to say is, when you are in a state of bliss, your dance will be blissful.
Yes.
And how do you derive this bliss? One of the most important elements is the nature, your understanding of nature, your connect with nature, and of course how inspiring the natural surroundings is. And so why our dances are changing is because we are not connecting with nature, and many a times we are not so close to nature also. That's also one of the reasons probably.
Yes, that is true. Yes, maybe like in the cities and all, people are not that much connected to nature, so we tend to, like, maybe everybody does not always keep those things in mind, or everybody does. It is actually, yes, yesterday also we were talking, like it is what we see that we remember more, what we feel in our experiences, in our daily experiences, that we try to keep in mind. And since here in the cities we are more moving away from nature, so these things maybe somewhere shift to the periphery, and so that is a problem, because that, but this is what it is, the basic root, the basic, and it is so beautifully explained. And like, yes, if when you say so, it is like Kathak. Yes, it seems like that is the predominant, the way, being a tree and the breeze. Yes, it is. And so that is it. It's every small aspect of nature. There is everything is it is ingrained in our dances. Everything has been imbibed from nature. And also it is not very consciously done. It is all in the subconsciously taken, and we depict it. And as you say, it is an impact. It is. Thank you, Didi, for this beautiful, I mean, what should I say? It is a beautiful explanation. Move to the next question. A sapling grows into a tree with its leaves and fruits and gives birth to new seeds. An artist develops from a young dancer to become a performer, a choreographer, and later matures to be an acharya. How would you draw parallel with the growth of a sapling and the growth of an artist?
Well, I love this question. You know, one very important factor for a sapling to grow into a tree, I would say there are 2 or 3 important factors. One is the soil. अगर मिट्टी उपजाऊ है, fertile है, तो if you plant the sapling,
Yes.
the sapling will happily grow. Then the second thing is watering and protection. You know, let the sapling be protected also. Suppose you plant a sapling and then you have wild animals, or you have some other forces that just remove the sapling. So that is one more important thing, is the preservation, the nurturing or the nourishment and the protection. And the third most important thing is the DNA of the sapling.
Yes.
What exactly I am planting? Am I planting a banyan tree? If I plant a banyan tree, let me share this with you. We have a lovely banyan tree in Mahagami Gurukul. And I quite remember when we were thinking of planting a banyan tree. I asked my Guruji, Pandit Birju Maharajji, to come and plant the sapling at our Gurukul. And this was, I think, around 23 years back when he came and he blessed our Gurukul. That was the beginning of my work here in Aurangabad. And he planted. And I immediately realized my responsibility. So I'm metaphorically telling you how the journey begins. So planting the sapling was one part of it. I was also very happy that my Guruji has planted this sapling. But then the bigger responsibility was to nourish, to protect, and to see to it that the sapling grows. For the next few years, I was totally committed and determined to see to it that the sapling is able to hold the soil properly. You know, the beginning phase is not so good with saplings. I know that because if you visit Mahagami Gurukul, you will see a beautiful lush green campus. And I can proudly say that all the lovely trees that you see in this campus, almost all are planted by me.
Wow.
So for many years, that was my daily routine to water the plants, to take care of the plants, to see to it that there is there are no weeds, and the soil is okay, and whether the saplings get enough sunshine and things like that. And so I eventually learned that the neem tree requires a different kind of attention. The gulmohar tree grows very fast without the need to get so much water. It doesn't extract so much water, but it grows very fast. And within a couple of years, you can even see flowers coming, sprouting, and leaves and branches and all that. So it grows very fast. So I decided to plant a lot of gulmohar trees simply because I thought Aurangabad is a drought-prone area. There is shortage of water, but I want to make this campus green. So I should choose plants that go well with the climatic condition and the water scarcity of this region. But let me tell you, the peepal tree. Peepal tree is like a determined tree. It grows even if you don't plant it. That was my discovery. It just grows. Just one sapling, one small part of the root, if it is just gets dropped somewhere in the soil, it will just hold the soil and start growing. So that is the DNA of a peepal tree. A banyan tree initially requires attention, requires care, requires more concerning things to be taken care of. But once it is able to hold the soil properly, then all that you can do is keep looking at the tree and be happy. Just pray that let this tree grow as much as it can, and just be inspired by just looking at the growth. So banyan trees are like that. And so what I want to say is that is one of the things. So we are all like plants and trees in some way or the other. But I don't know what DNA or what type or what species, I don't know. This is something to be known in the course of time. I think some of us choose to be grasslands. because we don't have so much of dream. हमको ज़्यादा बड़ा नहीं होना है, हमको like horizontal growth हो गया, like we are fine with that. Or see, there are seasonal plants. Seasonal plants don't grow so much. Seasonal plants may grow for a particular maybe spring season or rainy season, और बहुत छोटा उनका span रहता है, मैंने span of life also, but the growth also. थोड़ा सा उगते हैं, then they have small flowers, and then it's like a nice flower bed that you see, but it's not permanent. It is temporary. With time, you will suddenly see the flowers have stopped coming, and the tree has exhausted all its resources. The plant has exhausted all its resources, and so it doesn't grow anymore. So it reaches its optimum level, and that's all. Then all that you can do is you have to remove and then plant the next set of seasonal plants. So that is the second level. The third level would be bushes, which are strong, comparatively dense, grow well, can be used to create hedgings and borders and boundaries and all, but these are not large enough to give shade to anyone. So there are human beings who will grow for themselves but may not give nourishment or shade to anyone else. And then look at these trees. Look at the peepal tree, the neem tree, a mango tree. What does it give? You have, with time, you can calm your spirits under the shade of the tree. Rest for a while, you will feel good. You will also feel that the soil under these trees have a very welcoming and a very peaceful vibration. You will feel it. I can tell you because I live in a Gurukul, so I talk to the trees, it seems. Like there's a non-verbal communication with the trees. So I sense it. And the energy, the assurance, the protection, the shade, and then of course the medicinal value. A neem tree is born to bring some kind of therapy and some kind of assurance to people. So there are trees that can give. A mango tree gives mango fruits, and the seed again is, the source for the next cycle to begin, for the next tree to start its journey. So there are people who could be like these trees, and then there are very few who are like banyan trees. Very, very few. Very few. Why I say so is because a banyan tree not just grows and becomes a shady expanse, but it also starts creating the next generation by itself. So you have the prop roots coming down. So the prop roots start coming down and they start having a dialogue with the soil. I can feel it, that the prop root is trying to talk to the soil. I'm coming closer to you, I'm coming. And then there is a day when you suddenly feel that yes, the soil has now, embraced this prop root. The next tree is ready to begin its journey. Isn't it? You have a famous botanical garden in Kolkata, right?
Yes.
So,
and that banyan.
Where you have, there is one mother banyan tree.
Yes.
Which actually gave birth to so many banyan trees, isn't it?
Yes.
So that banyan tree is the guru. So we have gurus. See, everyone cannot be a guru. You can teach, but you cannot be a guru. If you can lead a life like a banyan tree, And you know what is the speciality of a banyan tree? You know about photosynthesis. And you know that plants can take carbon dioxide and release oxygen. But this is one part of the day. The other part of the day is
Opposite.
like human beings, isn't it?
Yes.
But what happens to a banyan tree? It gives prana vayu throughout the day and night. Banyan tree always releases life force around its environment. So trees are magical, and especially trees like the neem tree, the mango tree, peepal tree, or banyan tree. So I look at that kind of commitment, that kind of responsibility, that kind of wish and desire to give, and give selflessly, give unconditionally, and give forever. So that biggest giver is the one who is the Paramaguru. That can be even the concept. See, in our philosophical traditions, we've always looked at Guru as a concept, not the human form. Human form is like the embodiment of my idealism about the preacher, about the seer, whom I want to see, from whom I want to seek and learn. So that is the responsibility. When I see the growth of an artist, I think that that is the ultimate, is to give unconditionally, to give forever, to protect. You go to a tree, it will not say that, oh, I don't like you, so I don't want to give you shade. Mujhe tumko chhaav nahi dena hai. That doesn't happen. It's unconditional. Anyone can go and take the shelter. So in our parampara, gurus they had that role in the society. In the gurukuls had that role. It was a place where you go with absolute submission and you find that kind of resolve and peace and solutions. And that's how you seek shelter. And what do you do with such a tree that has given you so much of shelter, so much of nourishment, so much of inspiration and life force? When I said prana vayu, will you cut that tree? Will you do that? So that is where the value system is going wrong, is that we end up harming the tree many a times because we feel we've got enough shade now, I can manage with, let me do something. So that is something, the cultural ecology, I stress on this word, the cultural ecology. So cultural ecology draws all parallels and all analogies from the growth of a sapling to a tree. How it flowers, how the fruitation happens, and how the separation also happens. See, the tree separates from a leaf after a point of time. The tree also separates from a flower. So that detachment is also very, very important. It's very, very important to learn that part of the tree also, that part of the living of the tree also, that it does detach itself from whatever is, getting dissolved now, whatever is perishing now. It needs to, that's the natural course. So that is one way of looking. So then that's how I think that, yes, you have to first identify yourself what kind of tree you are or what kind of tree you aspire to be. Accordingly, you can look at your growth. And then looking at the life of a guru or a creative artist, I would say that I would identify the search or the research with the roots of a tree, because that is something which is not visible. What does the root do? Root brings stability because it goes deep inside the soil and it starts holding the soil, and so it gives some kind of stability. The second most important function is nourishment. It keeps on extracting nourishment from the deepest core of earth. deepest core of the soil. And that's how the tree remains standing erect. So it's one of the foremost duties of an artist. After you've learned from under the guru, what do you do? For the rest of your life, what do you do? Do you constantly keep dancing whatever you learned? Or did you also start thinking about the roots? So you have to go back in history, go back in parampara, look back, look down, look deeper, go deep into whatever you learned, whatever you found. Search something more than what you knew earlier. And that's how research word has come, because research is something which was there probably, but I did not know. So I researched. In our tradition, I can never say that I found this and I created this. I can never say that. It was probably lying in a dormant form. I discovered it, or I realized it, or today I experienced that revelation, and so I got to know about it. That's how we have to, इसलिए हमारे गुरुओं ने भी ना कभी ऐसे नहीं बोलते हैं कि हमने ये तिहाई बनाई. They never say that. वो बोलते ये सूझी, आज ये सूझा, आज ये सूझा. सूझा मतलब क्या? It just occurred in the mind. And that's also indicative of this beautiful creative process. We are part of this nature and the cosmic process. And so whatever we do, we don't do it independent of anything else. We are a component or a subset of a huge creative process. So anything creative that we want to do, we aspire to do, it has to be understood in that way, with that harmony. So as I talked about the roots, similarly I would say yes, your understanding of the concepts, that forms, the better it is, the stronger is your trunk, isn't it? And then the branches, so your expanse. In the course of time, did you reach out to so many people? Did you influence people through your thoughts, through your ideology? Did you teach people? Did you spread this knowledge? So that's how you look at the expanse of the branches. Looking at the flowers, now these are small productions and performances and creative offerings that an artist keeps on doing, and you feel fresh because, you feel that this is what the tree was doing, like in the form of the flower. Now you know that the tree was working on something. So flower is nothing but a part of, the huge ecosystem of the tree, but it's something which could be, indicative of the presentational part of it, the presentational part of the journey. And then we should always realize that just the way a flower grows, blossoms, it will perish also. Similarly, a performance, you pour your heart and soul and hard work and sweat and everything into something. You create it probably, you work on the creative process, you present it. After that, it's gone. It's in Shunya again, but you are still there with the fragrance. You feel it. You live with the fragrance, and that keeps you inspired to keep growing, to work on the next flower now. Next flower, abhi ek aur ugana hai, abhi ek aur karna hai. ठीक है, I know, फिर से उगेगा, फिर से merge हो जाएगा, फिर से उगेगा. But I know that's part of me. That's part of my being. And then I should not forget, while I'm doing this, I have to look at creating fruits that are, in a way, they induce the next cycle of creation. So maybe your shishyas, followers, people who can take it further like that. So this is how I think the analogies could be drawn, and it's always very inspiring and extremely, spiritual also at the same time, to understand that yes, These are the analogies. And so when you said that not many people want to do something that I was doing, so I can immediately relate to the role of a tree. See, grasslands grow very close to each other. Bushes also grow very close to each other. But I think a tree has to, it has no choice, but that's the destiny of a tree. It has to live in solitude. It has to live in isolation. It has to learn to extract nutrition from the soil all by itself. No one is going to come and, like, like pamper you and do this and do that. And tree is not at all a decorative tree object. Also, you have small ornamental plants which are decorative ones. So you would like to keep it in your living room or your garden. But tree, yes, it needs its space. Tree is also an authoritative statement. It is an authoritative existence also. It needs its own span. So I know the banyan tree in Mahagami, it's growing so vast that I know one of the cottages in the coming days, coming years, we will probably have to remove that cottage because the tree needs its space. But, that is the charm. But the tree worked hard towards its existence. The tree was always calm, focused, conditioned, unconditionally protecting everyone, unconditionally nurturing everything. And that's how a guru needs to be a giver. Whatever may come, a guru cannot be a complainer. This is what I think. There is difference between a guru, a teacher, and an artist, probably just an artist. There are so many artists who just want to dance or sing and perform. I can understand if artists complain, but I cannot understand if gurus complain, because gurus have to be eternal givers. They have to extract energy and resources. They have to extract spiritual energy and resources. This is what I mean to say. I don't want to say that kuch bhi ho jaye, they should not say. But what I want to say is that that's the spirit. They will live. They will eternally live, and they will eternally guide and protect people. But it is also the duty of the people who take the shade of these trees to pay their reverence, to pay their gratitude, not to harm those trees, not to cut those trees. That is where the sensitivity lies.
Yes.
This is what I think.
Yes. This is a very deep and beautifully explained. And yes, probably you are also you have been a tree, being in solitude. Yes. This is
I don't know, but yes, I could learn, how you can relate to a tree. I could at least look at that kind of dialogue.
Yes. And since you've been here and you have, as you were saying, you have been in nature, you have planted, it is a companionship that you have shared with them. So that has made you realize more strongly. And obviously what you are doing is, the way the analogy you draw, it is a work of a tree, obviously, giving shade. And I hope this carries on, and like the banyan tree, maybe one day it becomes vast. It is becoming, and with time, it is a very long process also. It takes time, and it takes. So I hope it becomes such a venture, it is a lifetime work. It is a lifetime hard work, which really cannot be compared to other things, I believe. Okay. This one, yes. This I just wanted to ask. This is also a parallelism. For a child, A sapling becomes a playmate. As a teenager, the plant becomes a friend. As an adult, it becomes a source of inspiration, which inspires to face the setbacks in life. And at the old age, it becomes a reminiscent. So, with time, a sapling grows to become a tree, and a young child matures to become an elderly. How would you explain this relationship, the growth of the tree and the growth of a human being, and the relationship that changes with every phase of life?
I think, as I said earlier, first of all, I would like to say that both are both are such, at present in the current times, both these ideas are so separated. We didn't begin as human beings, as natives on this, or inhabitants on this planet Earth many thousands of years back. I think we didn't begin like this, but I think as of now, the kind of life that human beings lead is very much away from the journey of a tree. It was not like this, probably, when, if you think of the early man, for instance. I think I often think of the early man. What was he doing on planet Earth? See, we were like animals, we are animals. We have to always keep this in mind, that we are living beings. We have the same roles and responsibilities like any other living being or any other entity, animate or inanimate, in this planet or in this cosmic existence. Having said that, what is so different between human beings and the rest of nature or the natural phenomenon? Probably it's to begin with, we look at the quest. I think amongst all the living beings, like animals and birds and fishes and other living beings, I think human being started exploring more than, or much more than, many others. And one of the most important exploration was the discovery of fire. So I always think that this needs to be talked about. What happened before the discovery of fire and after the discovery of fire? I will always say that human beings have been probably different before this and after this. Why I say so is, till then, our lives, the way we lived on this planet, was so much closer or almost similar to other animals. Think of an elephant or a tiger or a hyena, jackal or a bird. Does she need a night light or a bedroom? And so what did we do? We were living in the forests, like the entire landmass was forest or water bodies or deserts or mountains, probably. Isn't it? That's how Mother Nature was. And then what did we do? So we suddenly discovered fire. When we discovered fire, we started feeling that there is some kind of comfort that the fire brings. There is warmth. There is also protection. You can protect yourself from other wild animals. If you lit the fire at night, you can be assured that maybe a tiger or a wild animal may not come across, and so you feel protected. When it must be raining, what did we do? I think early man was not bothered about the rain, probably. हम भी बारिश में भीगते ही होंगे बाकी लोगों की तरह, like other animals, isn't it? But I think little later we became smarter and we started discovering the shelter homes like the tree, maybe पेड़ के नीचे shelter लेना, or caves. We started taking shelter there. Then we became smarter. So what we did, we started lighting the fire inside these caves. So we started, that is the beginning of the thinking of human mind about home. This idea of home. And this idea of home is the biggest disaster with human being. I can say it because all the ill feelings that we have today, it has generated from that idea. See, till then it was nice because it was about light, it was about warmth and protection. And then we also learned because of fire that now we can cook food. So we were hunters, isn't it? We were hunters and we started hunting. So whatever we would hunt and bring, we realized that yes, we can put it over the fire and we can roast it, cook it and then eat it. So we became more, in a way, we started refining our taste buds. We started refining the way we were living. The caves, which were just natural structures around the mountains and other spaces, now became our homes. We wanted to make these homes our homes. Like I wanted to say, this is my cave, that is your cave. So what happened? I started getting egoistic because the cave, which was not built by me, which was not created by me, but I start thinking that I own it. And how do I present this idea that this particular cave belongs to me? So I started painting it with my own choicest motives. And what were these motives? Early man had no ideas, no designs, no graphic design. So it was only animal forms. Jo janwar baha dikhe wohi. So you see the prehistoric painting, it is some elephant, some this thing, some man is hunting. A simple imagery is around their life incidences. Now what human mind is doing is now going away from nature. Till now, earlier I think we were part of nature. Then we started realizing, exploring nature, and we started understanding the resources of nature and how these resources can be used. We became users. And even today, that is our status in this nature. There are three kinds of consumers, three kinds of living beings. So one is the consumer, one is the producer, and one is the, what do you say? Like the one who does the decomposer, isn't it? The decomposer. So who contributes to nature? Of course, the producer, the plants, even the decomposers, because whatever they eat, if they eat some waste or something, they're actually helping in the decomposition, like the earthworms and so on. But what is human being doing? It's neither a producer, not a decomposer, it's only consumer. So since then that consumption began. So we started consuming water, we consumed leaves, we consumed this, and we started feeling happy and proud that there's so much to, to consume. And today you see the journey from then till now. What are we doing? We are constantly consuming the resources of nature without this feeling of paying our gratitude towards recharging it. Whatever little we can do, see, even if we plant a couple of trees or maybe 100 trees or 200 trees, we have recently planted 10,000 trees in one of our school project areas. I take care of a project called Vidya Aranyam. It's a school in the village area. So we took this pledge that we should plant 10,000 trees. And we ended up doing that. But imagine this small patch of land. This is like such a small, minuscule, negligible part of the entire earth. What kind of change can it bring? I don't know. It cannot bring enough change. All that it can bring is, it is creating some lungs, green spaces for people to breathe well. But don't you think whatever these trees are bringing is again for us to consume? So that reversal of role is not happening. Is that even if we are trying to safeguard nature, or even if we are trying to rejuvenate nature or recharge Mother Earth, it is again because we need to consume more, and the resources are they are getting exhausted, and so we want more resources. So kaise kare? So then we should have more water, we want more, then we should do rainwater harvesting, and we should do this, we should do watershed development, and all these things we are constantly thinking is again because the need is that I want to consume it more. And what about the next generation of human beings? Because how they will get water? How will our children get water? How will the grandchildren get water? What will happen 20 years from now or 30 years from now? We are more worried about that. So that is something which I terribly dislike. I terribly dislike this feeling, because even now, when there is huge crisis that has enveloped us from all directions, we as human beings are still looking at nature as the major source of, protection and nourishment to us. When will the time comes when we really feel that nature is the nucleus of our existence and we are nothing but just the component, one of the subsets, one of the components, that's all. And we are largely governed by the laws of nature. This is what Rabindranath Tagore wanted to do when he started Shantiniketan. He believed in the principle of naturalism. And this principle of naturalism is about looking at nature as the most powerful energy or entity that governs everything. Whatever exists, unfolds, and gets destroyed is essentially through nature. So it requires a lot of work for human beings to actually think in that direction. Long back, there was one of the greatest sociologists of the recent times who had coined this word anthropocentrism. You know what it means? It means, anthropo is for the human, no? Anthropology, bolte hain, Manav Shastra. So anthropocentrism is the outlook, is a way of thinking when you feel that human being is the central entity to everything. And unfortunately we are anthropocentric, we are egocentric, and we have many more problems also. We are racists also. We know how to divide ourselves. Nature doesn't know how to divide itself. So this is something which I wanted to share with you, Jalsha, that, it's so difficult to draw parallels. I mean, ideologically, yes, it is possible to draw parallels. But look at how a child grows. Think of how a child is born. Right from there, we are becoming artificial. Our Adivasis and our indigenous natives, they didn't think of going to a nursing home for childbirth. But from there, we are afraid. And that's how I would conclude what I was saying just now, is that the discovery of fire, it was a revelation. It was one of the proudest moments in the journey of mankind, but I would say it also brought lot of other things. like greed, gradually greed, ego, um, jealousy, and fear. Human being is one of the most fearful beings on this planet. You will rarely see a bird being afraid of lightning or any natural calamity. Of course they are impacted, of course they are affected, but we are the ones who panic the most. We are the ones who are afraid the most. And that fear now genetically is getting transferred to the next generations. And so we don't live the life of liberty, of freedom, of submission, surrender, and most importantly, of harmony, the way we must have lived thousands of years back. So as of now, technically we can look at the growth, but there's a huge long path that we must trace if we really want to, draw parallels with nature. This is what I think.
Yes, I guess, yes. Yes, if you think, then there is, it is.
One more thing is about the separation, which I did mention earlier also, is the separation.
Yes.
What happens when we part with someone? I think human beings cannot bear it, cannot bear the pain. Look at the generosity and the courage of a tree. It parts with its branch, its leaves, its flowers, its fruits. It remains detached. And it grows, it nourishes itself. So that is also something very beautiful, very, very beautiful.
Right. You've made like इतना कुछ सोचने में छोड़ दिए है, मतलब yes, actually, हाँ बहुत actually yes, it is that deep. मतलब अगर सोचे तो it is that it is serious also, and it is something. यही है कि it is, I don't know, like if अगर कोई उपाय अभी तो actually if it is again it is a little bit scary, like अगर सोचे तो लगता है कि I don't think there is a way out of all this entire mesh of this whatever, this urbanization and that we have put ourselves into. इससे
But one thing I would like to just share with you. I've been a science student also, which has been a great help in many ways, is because I could learn to logically examine things. It helped in few ways, like with my parampara and with my art forms and with my tradition, respect to my tradition, adherence to my tradition. I always realize that having a scientific outlook also helps, because it can allow you to look for reasons. So one more thing I want to say over here is that I think a couple of years back, we were doing a very interesting conference on global warming. You will be surprised. Mahagami was the host, and we did it jointly with Bhabha Atomic Research Center. And it was really a great honor for me and for Mahagami Gurukul, is that it was Bhabha Atomic Research Center who had written to us that they would like to do this conference in Aurangabad and jointly with Mahagami Gurukul. So I was pleasantly surprised, and I said, how come a dance Gurukul and you are bringing atomic scientists and physicists and geologists and geographers and so many kinds of scientists, and you want to work with a dance Gurukul? So they said, yes, we want to have, we want to look at climatic conditions and nature and global warming from a vast canvas, from a vast perspective. So we will want to come to Aurangabad and do this conference jointly with you. I was happy, very happy, and we did host that. It went off very well. We had scientists from all over the world who came. I was also offered an opportunity to speak on cultural ecology, and this has been one of my recent passions to learn and explore this area called cultural ecology. And I did feel that as a traditionalist, or rather a purist traditionalist, this is so much more important for an artist of this century to know and learn about cultural ecology, and something which has not been learned much in India. And so this Bhabha Atomic Research Center, just want to share this with you because this can be of great interest for you, is that we do talk about global warming, we do talk about nature, we talk about greening the campus or greening the surroundings or greening our city and greening the planet and so on. But I was having a discussion with a leading geologist from Germany during this conference, and even I was under impression that maybe this deforestation, because we are constantly cutting forests, cutting trees, and we are creating a lot of pollution, and that is one of the major reasons for global warming. And that's why we find that the glaciers are melting, and there's so many hot water currents and cold water currents, they're getting all haywire, and rains are happening any time in the year and so on. So this is because our seasonal clock has been disturbed and so on. And look at the forest fires. There are forest fires since months in Australia and America, and they are not getting extinguished. It's because these are strange and unfortunate things that are happening in nature. So I always used to think that it's probably because of the man-made disaster. Till I listened to this talk by the geologist, and he said that this is just a small percentage of the very big loss that is gradually happening. Human interference, the kind of loss that human beings have been creating because of industrialization, because of pollution and deforestation and so on, that is only one small percentage of it. But that's not the major reason of global warming. So then I asked him, Arif, then what? Because I always thought, because everyone is only talking about that. So he said, no, that's because Mother Earth is aging. It's the age of Earth, like every planet and star, which is born and it dies. Similarly, Earth is fastly moving towards its end. It may take few hundred years for that to happen, but Earth will not be forever. Just like nothing in this universe will be forever. Everything is getting born, it's growing, it's expanding, and will finally finish, will finally perish. And similarly, Earth will also go through the final phase of, then I think life will finish from Earth. And that's the future of Earth. I suddenly started getting very emotional, and I started feeling, oh my God, meaning all this will end one day. But that's how it is. You look at the sky at night, when you look at the stars, and we feel that, look at the beautiful shining stars, do we know that these stars are nothing but our past? We don't realize it. We think it's just shining for us. आज वो देखो तारे टिमटिमा रहे, कितने अच्छे लग रहे हैं. A child also feels, जैसे एक बच्चा खुश होता है वैसे हम भी खुश हो जाते हैं. When we look at the stars, हमारे अंदर का कवि मन जागृत हो जाता है. Not realizing that these stars are from the past, meaning it took many thousands of light years for the light from a star to come to our span of vision. हम उसको देख सकें उतना वो रोशनी आने को कितने लाइट ईयर्स लगे हैं. Many a times the star, the shine of the star that you see today at this moment is a star that has already died. So the last course of light has just reached you. Look at the expanse of this universe. It's like, this is what Einstein also said, just the way the Upanishadic messages and the verses and the discourses are also about that, about how negligible we are. And this is what Einstein also said. He said, in this vast universe, what is Earth? Planet Earth? Itna chota, one small little entity. Usme hum kaun hai? We are negligible. But look at the ego that we have. So, that conference with Bhabha Atomic Research Center suddenly made me feel that, I don't know why I started feeling that I'm going to lose Mother Earth, not realizing that I will of course go much before that. But it's just that we may, if we believe in the message of Gita, see, the subtle self will remain. And the subtle self, will it witness all that? Will it witness the final conclusion of Earth? Will it witness the final conclusion of all living beings on this planet? So these are the uncertainties about which we should always think. I think it is very important. There is no need to be afraid. There is no need to be scared of it. It is just giving way to the next. Just the way we know that dinosaurs existed on this planet Earth, and they were extincted after some time. Similarly, maybe human beings will extinct one day. We will go. Something else will come. Let it come. We will just pave the way for that kind of evolution. And one day Mother Earth will go. There will be a new Big Bang theory, maybe. There will be a new Milky Way. There will be another solar system. There can be another Surya. So then when I do the Surya Ashtakam, when I think of the elements, when I do my Bhumi Pranam every day for my dance practice, what is all that? It is again that sense of negation of my ego. That I am nothing. I am born from this generosity of nature. And very soon I will merge back to this huge creative existence, which keeps redefining itself, which keeps reinventing itself, and we don't know. But that's all that we should, and that's why all our ancient scriptures, our saint poets, our oral traditions, they always teach us to be detached. There is something called Ishwar Parinidhan. What does it mean? It doesn't make you orthodox, but it just makes you realize that whatever you do, do your karma and never think, never get, possessed by the results. Just move on in life. Keep giving if possible, and keep forgiving also if required. We don't forgive, we want to fight now. Unlike nature, nature likes to forgive, nature likes to heal, nature likes to protect. So let us do that if we can. We can be better artists, we can be better human beings, isn't it?
Yes, I guess, yes, it is. That is, if that is the way we think, we take instances, we take the example of nature, and then maybe the whatever is remaining and the changes that we ourselves have brought, maybe that can be altered a bit, or maybe it can be little better in the sense of better in how we look at each other, the way we are today uh, carrying our lives forward. Maybe that way of life, that way of leading life can change if we also learn to forgive, if we also learn to forget also, and it is all from nature. This has really been a very, very wonderful conversation. It has been a very, very big learning experience, since you have shared your ties, your experiences, and your own experiences with nature, and you have related it with your growth. You have been an artist, you have been a acharya, you have been the founder of such an institution, but somewhere your roots were there. You have been connected to the roots, and maybe that is why this thriving, that is why this immense growth. Thank you so much, Didi. Just one little message, if you can leave for everybody, that what I had told you in the beginning also, like, you have been an artist and also you have been a social reformer. The way you have worked with children, the way you have worked with the roots, you have worked to mold the minds of children, and also to maybe create a greener earth, as you were saying, like planting trees. It is all a combined process of growth. If you could just leave a message through us to present the future generation, that beyond professionalism, that beyond having materialistic achievements, which are important, but there lies a responsibility towards the society, a responsibility of spreading awareness, social awareness amongst all.
Yeah, I think one very important thing I want to tell everyone, especially the youngsters, is that one should have faith in yourself. I think this is the biggest thing which we can learn from nature also, or from everything that is around us. Have faith in yourself. Never change your natural self. Many times we force and we do that. We want to ape something else. We want to be like that and be like this. Just understand what is your nature. What are you? Who are you? Find yourself. And so have faith in what you are. And then nourish it, nurture it, improve on it. Have conviction in your path. Have conviction in the power of transformation. Everything is destined to be transformed through efforts, through a huge transformative process. So we have to, when you plant a sapling, you don't know how huge that tree is going to be. That's like a huge change. And so everyone has that potential to become like that. So have faith in the process. Don't be in a hurry ki nahi abhi grassland ban gaya na, I'm absolutely fine. I just love this. No, have bigger dreams if possible, and have the faith that yes, one day it will work. One day it may happen. And even if it doesn't happen, I think there needs to be more peaceful and more courageous way of looking at failures and misgivings. Never to get too much disheartened by that. To just see, if I cut a branch of a tree, what happens? Does the tree get angry with me and run after me? No. It will, after a year, you will see the same point where you had cut a branch, you will see new shoots which had already started coming long back. You will see a small branch is again emerged. That is the healing energy and the healing power of nature. So let us have faith in all that, faith and conviction in this transformative and healing process. And most importantly, when I say transformation, let us be kind to ourselves and things around us, and let us be little merciless also with ourselves whenever required. In the sense that when you have to work hard, riyaz karna hai, even if it pains, even if it feels that, nahi, do it. Be little merciless with yourself. Because today, if you're merciless, in that sense, like you can depersonalize something. I will call it depersonalizing. You have a vision, you have an aim, and that aim is beyond you. So why you should work hard is because that is where you want to go, that path for which your own lethargy and your own greed, your own wish to be always in the limelight, and this quick gratification and acknowledgements, I just have to remove this because these can be like obstacles. Let me be merciless with these things, these personality traits, if I at all have. Let me remove it. It's not easy. It's to be leading a silent journey in solitude is not so easy. People become confused and scared because they feel that, oh, I'm out of sight. वो कहते हैं ना, out of sight, out of mind. So what are we doing? We want to be known every day. We want to be seen every day. And that is a major obstacle in the transformative journey. So this is one humble suggestion to everyone, that let us look at that. Let us look at the responsibility that we have towards our own development, towards development of the surrounding, the ecosystem, towards development of our fellow beings also. उनका भी एक development बनता है, उनका भी एक हक है. We have to be caring and concerned about their development also. Let us facilitate that if possible. Let us initiate that if required. Or if they are facing any kind of difficulty, is there a way I can help them? I think that is coming closer to understanding the laws of nature, is that only I cannot grow. I need the ecosystem to grow around me. So when we look at the socially relevant work, it is about looking at the ecosystem. And ultimately it is little selfish also, because ecosystem अच्छा रहेगा तो हम भी अच्छे रहेंगे. Isn't it? So that is the most important thing, to understand that yes, I am a subset of the ecosystem and I have to take care of everything, be it a socially relevant work, be it taking care of the parampara, be it taking care of the guru's parampara, because if I protect that, yes, if I be a worthy disciple, only then I am in a way paying respects and paying my acknowledgement to this ecosystem, because I am born from that ecosystem. तो ये बहुत सारी ऐसी बातें हैं. ट्री का फ्लावर से रिलेशन क्या है, वो हमेशा समझ में आना चाहिए कि मैं इस ट्री का सबसेट हूँ, मैं क्या हूँ. And constantly be in this course of rejuvenating, reinventing, revisiting whatever you lost, and acknowledging with courage and with absolute peace and submission that these are the things I lost. Fine, I have to move on. So that's what I feel. That's what I feel we can together we can do. Bring more fragrance around us. No?
Yes. Thank you, Didi, for leaving this message. Yes, maybe hope it is a message for everyone that yes, create that fragrance around us and stick to our roots and always realize that we are that microscopic part of that macroscopic wheel and nothing more than that. So realizing that, keep ourselves grounded, keep ourselves rooted, and also maybe detached, but also yes, this is a nice thing, being little merciless towards your own self. Yes, otherwise, yes, too much of loving oneself has created this problem of maybe this the main a of we are too much concerned about our own selves. So being selfless. And thank you so much, Didi, for this message, for this wonderful conversation. We have learned a lot. I hope, really sincerely hope that this leaves a message. Maybe if one person also gets maybe influenced by this, that will also be a great help to the society. Again, my humble gratitude to the wonderful work you have been doing. Hope, I pray that you carry on this work for your entire future, and God gives you the strength to carry on this this wonderful work that you are doing for the society also. Thank you so much, Didi, for your time and your views. Pranam, Didi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Okay. Okay.
নমস্কার, আমি শ্রীপর্ণা বোস। আমার গুরু প্রয়াত গুরু মুরলীধর মাঝি এবং সঙ্গীত নাটক একাডেমি অ্যাওয়ার্ডি গুরু অলকা কানুনগোর চরণ কমলে জানাই প্রণাম। অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ, শুভেচ্ছা, অভিনন্দন জানাই জলসা চন্দ্রকে এমন সুন্দর একটি ফেস্টিভ্যালের আয়োজন করার জন্য এবং এই প্রাণিত্ব ফেস্টিভ্যালে আমাকে ইনভাইট করার জন্য বা আমাকে সুযোগ দেওয়ার জন্য। প্রাণিত্ব ফেস্টিভ্যাল বেসড অন নেচার, এর জন্য আমি একটু লিখেছি কিছু, সেটা পড়ে আপনাদের শোনাচ্ছি। আমরা ভীষণ ভাগ্যবান যে আমরা এমন সুন্দর একটি পৃথিবীতে জন্মেছি যেখানে বৈচিত্র্যপূর্ণ মনোমুগ্ধকর প্রকৃতির স্পর্শ আমরা পাই। আমাদের জীবনের ন্যূনতম চাহিদা শিক্ষা, খাদ্য, বস্ত্র, বাসস্থান প্রকৃতি দিয়ে এসেছে। প্রকৃতি প্রদেয় শিক্ষায় শিক্ষিত হই আমরা ঈশ্বর শ্রেষ্ঠ সর্বশ্রেষ্ঠ জীব মানুষ। তাই প্রকৃতিকে সংরক্ষণের দায়িত্ব বর্তায় এই মানুষেরই উপর। কিন্তু মানুষ ভীষণ স্বার্থপর, নিজের প্রয়োজনের তাগিদে, নিজের স্বার্থে প্রকৃতির দেওয়া ভালোবাসার উপহারগুলি অনায়াসে দিনের পর দিন ধ্বংস করে চলেছে, আঘাত করছে প্রতিনিয়ত। তাকে ধ্বংস করার জন্য কতই না বুদ্ধি, শক্তি, শ্রম কাজে লাগায় মানুষ। কিন্তু প্রকৃতি, সে তো অসীম শক্তির অধিকারী। সে সহ্য করে মানুষের ক্রমাগত এই অত্যাচার, আর একদিন এই অত্যাচারে অতিষ্ঠ হয়ে মুহূর্তের মধ্যে ধ্বংস করে দেয় তারই দেওয়া ভালোবাসার উপহারগুলি। সে বুঝিয়ে দেয়, বারংবার শিক্ষা দেয়, মানুষের বুদ্ধি, শক্তি, শ্রম সব তারই দেওয়া। তার শক্তির কাছে মানুষের শক্তি একেবারেই তুচ্ছ। এই প্রকৃতির সঙ্গে মানব প্রকৃতির বা মানব চরিত্রের মিল পাওয়া যায়। মানুষের সুখ, দুঃখ, হাসি, কান্না, রাগ, হিংসা এই সব কিছুর অভিব্যক্তি যেমন বহিঃপ্রকাশ হয়, তেমনি প্রকৃতিরও বহিঃপ্রকাশ হয়। কৃষ্ণ যজুর্বেদের অন্তর্গত শারীর আকা উপনিষদে বলা হয়েছে প্রকৃতি জড় কিন্তু পরিবর্তনশীল। প্রাকৃতিক বিপর্যয় যেমন আমাদের ভীতপ্রদ করে দেয়, তেমনি আবার সকালের রোদ ঝলমলে আকাশ রাতের নক্ষত্রখচিত বা চাঁদের স্নিগ্ধ আলো, বা উদীয়মান বা অস্তাচলের সূর্য, বৃষ্টি শেষে রামধনু, সঙ্গে মলয় বাতাস, পাখির পূজন, নদীর কলতান, দুরন্ত ঝর্ণার ছুটে চলা, ঝিঝি পোকার ডাক, গাছের পাতার সনসন শব্দ, এই ডাল থেকে ও ডালে ছুটে চলা এক ঝাঁক পাখি বা প্রজাপতি, বৃষ্টি ভেজা মাটির গন্ধ, শীতে সূর্যের তাপ, নানা রঙের ফুল ফল পাতা মাটি, ভ্রমরের গুঞ্জন, পাহাড় পর্বত, নদী সমুদ্র, স্বাধীন প্রাণী জগৎ, ময়ূরের নাচ, হাতির কমনীয় গমন, হরিণের চকিত চাউনি, পুষ্করিণীর মাছ, হাঁসের চলন, এমনকি ছোট্ট বাবুই পাখির সযত্নে তৈরি নিখুঁত বাসা, এই সমস্ত আমাদের আনন্দ দেয়। প্রকৃতি শেখায় ভালোবাসতে, আর এই ভালোবাসা থেকে ভালো লাগা, আর তার থেকে সৃষ্টি হয় শিল্পের। প্রকৃতির রূপে মুগ্ধ হয়ে, তার খামখেয়ালিপনায় সাড়া দিয়ে, তার রূপ রস গন্ধে মানব মনের মিল খুঁজে পায় শিল্পী। কখনো রং তুলির ক্যানভাসে, কখনো বা কলমের কারসাজিতে, সুরে ও সঙ্গীতে, কখনো বা নাচের আঙ্গিকে, অথবা ছিনি হাতুড়ি বাটারির খুটখাট শব্দে পাথর পায় প্রাণ। আর প্রকৃতি থেকেই শিল্পী পায় তাল ছন্দের জ্ঞান। এটা লিখতে লিখতে আমি একটা কবিতাই লিখে ফেলেছি, সেটা পড়ে একটু শোনাচ্ছি। যখন ক্লান্ত ধরা তৃষ্ণার্ত উষ্ণ আলোর ছটায় ছটায়, মেঘের মেলায় পাখির ডানায় বৃষ্টি আসে ফোঁটায় ফোঁটায়, কেকা নাচে আপন মনে, গজ নাড়ায় কান, বিহক শিশু শস্যদানা সবুজ পেল প্রাণ। ফুলের সাজে ঝুমকোলতা, জুই, কেতুকি, কুসুম কানন, পদ্ম শালুক, পুষ্করিণী, তৃপ্ত মাছ ও হাঁসের চলন। তপন তাপে পিয়াসী বৃদ্ধি পায়, শীতল সলিল স্পর্শ, বৃষ্টি শেষে তুলির রঙে রামধনু রোমহর্ষ। একজন নৃত্যশিল্পী হিসেবে নাচ ও প্রকৃতির যে নিবিড় সম্পর্ক, তার একটি ছোট্ট নমুনা একটি ছোট মিউজিকের সঙ্গে করে দেখাবো, দেখুন কেমন লাগে। মিউজিকটি গুরু অলকা কানুনগোর নৃত্য শিক্ষণ প্রতিষ্ঠানের সিঞ্জনের মিউজিক। আসুন দেখা যাক।
अम्बरस्य कमनीयं पश्यरूपमद्भुतम् आकर्णय कनगर्जन कम्पितजीवन्तम् आलोकय जलशीकर गतभास्कर इंद्रधनुष सुंदर वर्णकाभिसर्पणम् इंद्रधनुष सुंदर वर्णकाभिसर्पणम् शोभितं वर्षनीललोहितं वर्षनीललोहितं लीलया विराजितं वर्षनीललोहितं लीलया विराजितं शोभितम् आत्मबोधभावितम् ऊर्जसा च वर्धितम् आत्मबोधभावितम् ऊर्जसा च नभसि सुमधुरायितं सदा
Namaskar, I'm Polumi Chakraborty, an Odissi dancer from Kolkata, disciple of Guru Srimati Aloka Kanunga. First of all, I would like to thank Srimati Jalsha Chandra Didi for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Today, I will present Lalita Lavangalata. This is an Abhinaya, an Ashtapadi from Jayadev Geet Govinda. This song describes influence of spring season on lovers and those suffering from their divine lover Sri Krishna. Radha is beautiful and delicate like Vasanti flowers. In spring season, she was Cupid and was roaming in Vrindavana in search of Krishna. Her confidant comforted her with these words, "Oh dear friend Radha, cool breeze of spring season from clove bushes is gently blowing. Cuckoos are cooing sweetly. Bowers and cottages are echoing with humming sound of bees. Sri Krishna is strolling and dancing with gopikas delightfully. Come on, let's go, there as we are pinning in love for him." The song also describes the ambience is surcharged with fragrance of Vakula flowers and humming bees. Fresh and fragrant flowers are intoxicating redness of Kingsuka flowers resembles Manamadha's nails which turned red because he pierced the hearts of lovers with his nails. Fully blossomed Kesara flowers are shining like golden umbrella of Manamadha, the king of love. Swarm of black bees and bunches of flowers are like quiver and arrows of Manamadha. Fragrance of malati and jasmine flowers intoxicate even the minds of hermits. In spring season, Atimukta creepers are twining around mango trees. River Yamuna is flowing by the side of Vrindavana, sanctifying the forest with water. Lalita Lavangalata, Parisilina Komala Malaya Samire, Madhukara Nikara Karambita Kokila Kujita Kunja Kutire, Virahati Haririha Sarasa Vasante, Nrityati Uvati Janena Samana Sakhi, Virahi Janasaya Durante. This wonderful piece has been composed by Padma Vibhushan Guru Sri Kelucharan Mahapatra. Music Pandit Bhuvaneshwar Mishra. Rag Vasant, Tal Ek Tali and Tripata. Lalita Lavangalata Parasilina Komala Malaya Samiri.
Get